Web accessibility refers to the practice of designing websites and applications in a way that makes them usable and accessible to people with disabilities. Here are some of the most common web accessibility standards around the world. Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, WCAG. This is a set of guidelines developed by the World Wide Web Consortium, W3C, that provides a technical standard for web accessibility. WCAG is organized into 3 levels: A, and AAA, with each level containing success criteria that websites and applications must meet to be considered accessible. WCAG is the most widely used web accessibility standard globally. WCAG 2.1 covers a wide range of recommendations for making web content more accessible. Americans with Disabilities Act, ADA. This is a U.S. federal law that prohibits discrimination against people with disabilities. The ADA includes provisions that require websites to be accessible to people with disabilities. While the ADA does not provide specific technical requirements for web accessibility, courts have relied on WCAG guidelines to determine whether a website is accessible. Section 508. This is a U.S. federal law that requires electronic and information technology to be accessible to people with disabilities, including websites. Section 508 provides specific technical requirements for web accessibility that are similar to WCAG. European Accessibility Act, EAA. This is a European Union law that requires products and services, including websites and mobile applications, to be accessible to people with disabilities. The EAA has not yet come into effect, but it is expected to be implemented in 2025. Accessible Canada Act, ACA. This is a Canadian federal law that aims to remove barriers to accessibility in various areas, including websites and digital content. The ACA requires organizations to make their websites accessible to people with disabilities and provides specific technical requirements for web accessibility. These are just a few examples of the many web accessibility standards that exist around the world. By following these standards and implementing best practices for web accessibility, developers can create digital products that are usable and accessible to everyone, regardless of their abilities. Please note, at this time, there is no indication that these web accessibility standards will change in the near future. However, it's worth noting that accessibility standards may evolve over time as technology advances and new challenges emerge. For example, as new types of devices and interfaces become available, web accessibility standards may need to be updated to ensure that people with disabilities can fully access digital content. Additionally, changes in laws and regulations could also impact web accessibility standards in different regions. It's important for developers to stay up to date with the latest accessibility guidelines and best practices to ensure that their websites and applications remain accessible and compliant with relevant regulations.